Welcome to the D-Spot podcast. Dr. Dana McNeil is a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in working with couples using the Gottman method. Her evidence-based practice provides support for the wide range of relationship issues that modern couples face. By using her open, affirming, and outside-of-the-box thinking, Dr. Dana is able to approach her work with couples by bringing both insights and tools that reflect the realities of today's complicated relationships. Dr. Dana features guests on her podcast that include a unique array of celebrities, CEOs, influencers, and everyday folks who are all working on navigating new conversations about how society views what goes into a successful relationship. And now, here's your host, Dr. Dana McNeil.
Hello, and welcome to the D-Spot podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dana McNeil. This is the podcast about all things relationships and the people in them. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to a colleague of mine, Jennifer Rehor. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is an ASEX certified sex therapist, we'll talk about what that is, and a clinical supervisor. Her work as a therapist and supervisor, she specializes in BDSM, kink, non-monogamy, couples therapy, and sex therapy. You're busy, Jennifer. Jennifer is also the founder and owner of Affirming Therapy Center, which is in San Diego. She owns a group private practice, and she has a team of sex-positive clinicians who are committed to serving people of gender, sexual and relationship diversity, including LGBTQ, heterosexual, kink, BDSM, sex work, adult industry, single, monogamy, non-monogamy, swinging, polyamory. She does it all. It's a variety of relationship dynamics and family configurations. Jennifer's vision is to create a space for therapists with the same passion for serving these communities and to mentor them to grow and thrive in this field. Jennifer is also, which is something I definitely want to talk about today, the co-author of a book called Women and Kink, Relationships, Reasons, and Stories, which is based on her original research for nearly 1,600 women from the kink community, and her book supports and empowers each reader to build a relationship and life that best suits their needs. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome.
Hello, Dana. Thank you for having me.
I could go on and on. Your bio is short compared to all the things that I know about you. So tell us a little bit about what got you into this particular field of working with clients. What inspired you or led you to this aspect in this population?
Yeah, so actually for me, it wasn't that I was a therapist looking for specialization. It was that I had a different career and found myself really drawn to learning more about what's actually out there in the world in terms of various kinds of relationships, BDSM activities. I was attending all sorts of workshops and whatnot. And when I was burnt out in my previous career, which was in marketing and advertising, my now husband, then boyfriend, said, well, what are you drawn to? What are you interested in? And so I just very matter of fact said, I want to learn more about sex and all these other things that are out there in the world. And so I ended up going to a master's program in San Francisco, which is where I conducted this research for the book. And I have a master's degree in human sexuality from that. And so from there, I went to school not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I was just kind of like exploring and figuring out all those things. And I realized from there that I wanted to become a therapist. And so I went for my second master's degree because a master's in human sexuality does not actually qualify you for licensure in therapy, right, in California. So I already went into my graduate school program knowing that I had a passion for working with these particular populations.
Great. Yeah, you and I originally met because we were both starting our group practices around the same time, and you kind of also were interested in and working in couples theory, emotion focused therapy, and I was doing the Gottman method, and you and I would kind of talk about the differences between them, and then also how you're incorporating the sex therapy part of it. And I was always fascinated about the things that you were studying and the things that they were teaching you, and that you had to go outside of the first masters to get it. Because for me, as a couples therapist, why are we not integrating sex in it, right?
Right.
This is a part of a couple's relationships, for heaven's sakes, right?
Right.
And so I love that you have the two that you join together. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between, traditionally what a couples therapist looks like, and then how a sex therapist who specializes, how they're kind of different, or what clients would expect from the two?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that, you can become a licensed therapist and call yourself a couple therapist or call yourself a sex therapist without any additional training outside of grad school.
Right.
And I mean, grad school, I think my sex therapy class was 2 units, not even a full course. And I had one couples therapy course. And as you know, being certified in Gottman, that there's so much more to know when it comes to treating couples. There's so many nuances, there's so many techniques, there's so many ways of viewing how couples relate to each other that's far more advanced than what we get in grad school. And the same is true in sex therapy. You can absolutely say on, marketing and websites, I specialize in sex therapy, but not have any additional training outside of grad school.
Right.
And so I kind of liken it to, I could do children's therapy. It's within my scope of my licensure. I have worked with, I think, 3 children before I got licensed. It's not my passion. It's not my forte. I don't have additional training. And there are people out there who that's what they do. That's what they love. They get certified in play therapy, art therapy, things like that. And so I just refer to those people when people are coming to me, potential clients come to me and they want, help with their adolescent child. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
So
So, I mean, what you're saying is something that I think consumers are aware of, but maybe grad schools aren't aware of, is we're suspicious as consumers of somebody that says that they can do everything, right? It's like, if I cannot be a generalist anymore, there's too much to learn. There's too many nuances. There's too many certifications. There's too many need for specialty. If you're somebody that does an ADHD teenager in the morning, somebody who's got depression at noon, and then you're trying to see a couple in the afternoon, you're just not going to get it. I mean, and the reality is that you need to see someone who specializes and spends the majority of their time learning and thinking about the issues that are happening for you as a couple. And if sex is that, or incompatibility, or changes in our sexuality, or any of the things that are, happening for couples that they're regularly coming into couples therapy about, and we as couples therapists haven't spent the time to go learn more about what you're specifically doing, we may not be serving them well.
Right. And it's also interesting to me that, we have 2 completely different fields of study, right? There's the field of study of couples relationship therapy, and there's the field of study of sexuality. And I've been to both kinds of conferences. And of course, there's, just the general psychology or like camp conference and things like that. But if you go to a couples conference, they often leave out the conversation of sexuality.
Yeah.
And you go to a sexuality conference, and they often don't even talk about it in terms of dyadic work, which is working within relationships, as though sexuality is, just in a silo of our own personal psyche. Right. And so
what do you think that is? Because I agree with that 100%. And one of the things that I have often found a little confusing, just to be honest, is no matter what theory of couples therapy you practice, traditionally, the sense is that if you work on the relationship, aka the friendship or the trust level, that there's this assumption that the sex life will just organically fall into place. And that has not been my experience as a couples therapist. How about you?
Yes, I have heard that as well. And perhaps in some cases that works. In other cases, the opposite happens when there's
Mm,
more familiarity. It feels more like family and
mm,
it's too close. And there needs to be that sort of distance for desire that needs to happen. But for me, when I hear things like that, it sounds like the person saying it is not comfortable talking about sex.
mm-hmm. Or
Right? Like, oh, it'll just solve itself. Okay, but there are nuances and there are needs that our clients have in working through whether it's erectile dysfunction or whether it's uh, this desire discrepancy, which I think is the number one reason couples come to sex therapy, is
Mhm.
because no two people are identical. And there's also quality of sex, right? So oftentimes, when couples go to a couples therapist who doesn't talk about sex and they just say it's supposed to fall into place and then it doesn't, they actually internalize that as what's wrong with us.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that we have the potential as, couples therapists, quote unquote, to almost come across as judging or implying that there's something wrong in the relationship, because if the main way that a couple identifies as connection is around sex, and I'm telling them, hey, the main way that you should be connecting around, getting closeness is through conversation, I'm already like building and shaming them or telling them that their approach is wrong, and I'm not joining them.
Right. And it might be that one person's love language is sexual activities and another person's love language is quality time. And so you're actually joining one partner and not the other.
Yes, agreed. So there is value for both of our skills. And my goal always is let's align with great sex therapists so that we can cross refer with each other, which I love referring to your practice because you treat my clients so very well and you so very much understand all of these dynamics about the sexual needs. So thank you for being you.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, absolutely. And, when you have something like a specialization in sex therapy, it means that we don't have to necessarily, uh, a client doesn't have to leave their current therapist to work with a specialist.
Mhm.
They can work triadically, right? We can work together. And I have used other specialists in other areas with clients who I've had maintain on my caseload and go see that person because of that specific need. Like, for example, out of control sexual behavior, I might refer out to one of the local specialists who's a colleague of mine as well and work together.
So talk about what that session or first couple of sessions look like, because I imagine there's a few people listening that are like, is she having them have sex in her office and she's watching and like
No.
directing like a film of like, I know it's not, but tell those who are not familiar with this what that experience would be like. What could they expect?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because there clearly is a misunderstanding out in the consumer world. Sex never happens in my office. We do not eroticize our sessions, meaning if you're coming in specifically because you want to have an erotic experience, that's not what we do here. That's not what this is about. Sex never happens in therapy. And so, no, basically, if I have a client come in who is a couple and they tell me up front, we want to work on sex therapy, it's just the same as if you had a couple come in and not say that in the very beginning, which is just like, tell me about yourself. What brings you in? I'm always asking in the first session or two, just a highlighted history of your relationship. I
Mm,
want to know the highs and the lows because you need those highs for connecting points, right? And then I'll ask specific questions about sexuality, what's working, what isn't, what do you see as maybe an issue that you'd like to work on or that you'd like to improve. Not everybody comes in for sex therapy because there's a problem.
mm.
Some people come in because they just want more or better or more connectedness or something, or maybe they want to incorporate a different activity or a kink or a fetish and they don't know how to broach the subject with their partner and they want to do it in a safe space.
Mm.
So it
you
really is.
recommend they do that? So if they're coming in saying, hey, I want to open up the relationship, or I want to bring some things, fantasizing, I'm scared how you're going to respond, how would a partner start to have that conversation with another partner?
Yeah, so I've worked with couples where it literally took 6 months just to start having the conversations about opening up the relationship. Like they knew
Wow.
that's what they were coming in for,
Uh-huh.
and they just weren't in a securely attached place yet. And they just said, this is on the table, but we want to actually get there in a healthy way, because they had actually tried opening up in the past and it did not go well. And so, yeah, it's just being open to the conversations and taking it as slow as it needs to go and building that foundation so that they can have the conversation. Whether or not they actually opened up was kind of irrelevant. It was like, can we make space to have the conversation so that both people feel heard?
Because that must be such a weight off of one partner's shoulders. If this is something that I've been interested in and I'm terrified that you're going to shut me down or divorce me or like push me away, just being able to say that in a safe space and take that backpack off and open it on the table and everybody look at it and not run and freak out and leave the building must be such a relief that in itself there's value in that part of it, even if nothing else progresses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then if it does progress, then I work with them on creating a relationship agreement that's not just a bunch of rules, but actually based on values and goals and what they want, what's their vision for an open marriage or an open relationship. So it's, that's a whole other process
You just
that
touched on
comes.
a really important point that I often have, clients that come to our office, they're not understanding the difference between boundaries, rules, and agreements, right? And so you just said something really important, because the phone call comes in like, we want an appointment so that we can start setting boundaries about opening it up. And what they really sometimes mean is we want to set a bunch of rules down. And you said something important, that an agreement is not a rule.
Yes, because if someone's just coming in and saying, we need rules, what that indicates to me is someone is not really comfortable yet with opening the relationship.
That they want to have the rules. So
The rules helps them feel secure.
Okay.
As opposed to the security of the relationship helping them feel secure.
Is it your role to help them see that they're not ready, or do you just kind of like guide them with questions or play devil's advocate to ask them about situations? So how do you approach that if you're concerned that maybe we're not in a good place, there's too much of a need for rules, and you're like, hey, we're not in a place where we're feeling strength in the relationship? How do you start that conversation with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different and unique for each situation. But I think in general, I would say, okay, wait, before we get to the rules, let's talk about the vision and the values. And so that each rule, people still can have boundaries, can and should have boundaries, right? But the boundary should be in alignment with their values. And they need to, like, the values are the compass, right? Like, where's this pointing to? If it's just out from left field, the other person's probably not. If you don't understand why a boundary is there, the other person may or may not take it seriously, right? They may or may not abide by that boundary.
And if they're not used to having boundaries to begin with, then it's even more complicated. So you might have to roll it all the way back to like, what is a boundary? Why is it important? Is it okay?
Why is this important? Okay, so let's just say someone has a boundary of, I don't want you taking a new partner to our favorite restaurant where we met. Okay. I see that as a totally fair and acceptable boundary, because maybe one of the values is I still want to feel special in some way within our relationship. And this is a way that I feel like this is our shared memory. And I just want that for us.
I want to protect that for us.
I want to protect that piece that makes us unique and special.
Because that's a ritual of connection, as we call it in the Gottman world. That's something that signifies our partnership. That's something that is unique to us. I'm not trying to keep you from creating unique things with this other person, but I need to put a protective bubble around this part for us.
Yeah. And I would even rephrase that as not I need to, but can we both be on board with this? Do you see this as a value and a ritual of connection? Because honestly, like if I see something as a ritual of connection for me and my partner doesn't see that, then it kind of, is it really? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Like we're making an assumption that based on my expectations that it's a ritual of connection, but I haven't got your buy-in that you're viewing it the same way.
Right. And so if there isn't that buy-in, then maybe I need to reevaluate. Maybe that's not the thing that makes us special. Maybe it's something else. And then like what part of the agreement might and should, I think, include what is, a couple of things that make us unique. Because if you start saying, well, I don't want you to go here, there, or the other place, and then all of a sudden everything's off limits, then again, it makes me wonder, like, are you actually ready for this? But if you can pick like 1 to 3 things that really strike you as this is special, this is between us, like our anniversary, do not go out with somebody else on our anniversary, right? A couple of things, sure. If it's like every day of the week is special, then something's a little off kilter, or you're actually trying to communicate something to your partner that you're actually not okay with this.
Or I might be trying to micromanage your relationship with this other person, which I have no business being in.
Right. Which, as we know, control is a way of ameliorating anxiety. So that's an indication that there's some anxious factor happening. If someone's coming in with 50 rules, like who can even remember 50 rules, right?
I come in with my spreadsheet, it's color coordinated,
it's just not fun anymore at that point. It's my husband has a terrible memory. And so when we talk about boundaries and rules, I know that he's probably not going to remember them. And it doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It doesn't mean he did anything to hurt me or harm me on purpose. It's just, he just does not have a good memory. And so things just need to be as straightforward as possible. And they have to make sense. That again, it has to point back to some value so that there's a reason for it and a purpose for it that everyone involved can have buy-in with.
And that's a key part, right? Everybody who's involved has to have buy-in, even perhaps a partner that's not, if you're, a primary and you're bringing in another partner, you need to get that person's buy-in as well, right? So that everyone's needs are being taken into consideration.
Yes. And that's the other piece of, when I say all parties, it's, does the other person understand that your wedding anniversary is important to you? And therefore, don't expect to go out with them on that day. And also, what are the partner's needs and wants and desires? Because, right, oftentimes people, when they're just starting the opening up process, they almost talk about this other person or people as like disposable in a way, or like not actual. Like, I like to humanize the other potential person, even if it's like an imaginary idea of like, this person also has feelings. And so when I hear people say, well, we're just going to try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll shut it down. It's like, yeah, but you're involving another human being who has a heart.
And
I hope.
And is invested in the outcome of this relationship as much as you are.
Yeah. And so if you're not quite ready, don't start bringing other people in yet. Wait until you actually are ready before you start making contact with others.
I like that you're there to help kind of give them milestones or help them identify what would help them feel like it was ready or it was a good experience so that they don't go in and obliterate someone else's life.
Right.
Great. So let's shift to talking about your book, which we had you as a guest at our book club and it was very well received. And when we have your book in the office, everybody is in love with the topic. So you wrote a book
Great.
on women and kink. And so how did you get 1,600 women to participate in this, especially from a specific population of the kink community? How did you approach it? Like, how did you put out the information that you wanted to talk to them?
So I was specifically looking for community-based participants and only women because I was trying to fill in the gap in the research that was based almost entirely on men. And so this is 2010. So I'm just thinking back on like the process might be different if I were to do it today, but I basically went on one website, the BDSMeventspage.com, that had listed actual in-person events in various locations. And I contacted every event organizer within the time frame I was going to be doing my study and asked for permission to recruit at their event.
Okay.
And so I got, I think, 16 organizations that said yes. So for each of them, I actually printed out physical flyers and mailed them to the organizers to set out during their events.
Wow. Okay. So then you sent out the surveys, which you have in your book, and then you collected all of the data and you started kind of looking for themes or looking for like ways of viewing that you wanted to present in your book. And you do it in a very unique way. Talk about your book a little bit and the structure of how it's set up.
Yeah. So basically what ended up happening was I took the original data that was collected and I crunched the numbers for the quantitative piece for my thesis because I just wanted to graduate, right?
Yes,
And then
yes.
they're like, just do something where you can finish, right? Because you could do this forever and like it's master's level, so I wasn't paid for it.
Right.
And then I got some of that approved in the publication Archives of Sexual Behavior. So that article is titled The Sensual, Erotic, and Sexual Behaviors of Women from the Kink Community. And once that was done, that was a whole other ordeal. That took 3 years to get into the publication. Wow. Very rigorous peer review process. So once that was done, I actually kind of took a break from the data. And that was around the time that I was getting licensed and really focusing on working towards my sex therapy certification and then growing my group practice a couple of years after that. And then I met my co-author, Julia Schiffman, and the first day we met, I told her about this data and was like, just kind of in passing, like, haha, would you ever want to co-author a book with me? And she's like, well, that's on my bucket list of things to do is to author a book about kink. And I'm like, okay. So a few months after that, I saw an email from somebody on the ASECT listserv saying, hey, if you're going to be at the ASECT conference this year, Routledge is going to be available to meet with potential book ideas. And so we just jumped on that and said, let's apply, let's see what happens. And so we turned in our information and made an actual formal pitch. And they ended up, that whole process was its own special thing. Like they end up putting it in their own peer review process just to approve a pitch.
Wow.
And there were a couple of revisions and then finally they said yes. And once they said yes, it was like, all right, let's get going. Let's do this thing. And we ended up sending the entire data set to someone who is a research student. So she has access to all of the applications and whatnot, software. And she came back a few months later with it somewhat organized, into like coded into themes. And then from there, it took Julia and me almost a full year just to figure out which quotation was going in which chapter and in what order, and how, moving, like if we move this section over here, it makes so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so just the organization of the book took one full year.
Wow.
And then from there, we were able to add our commentary, add the sort of reflection questions that are throughout, because we really wanted to make this not exactly a self-help book, but just a food for thought. Like, what do you think about this? How
You
does
do
this
a
apply to
really great
you?
job, like providing examples. Like I was, impressed that you'd be talking about a subject, like, how do we keep it safe, or what do our rituals look like? And then you'd have all of these stories or comments from different participants that illuminated what you were talking about, right? So it isn't just this dry textbook where it's like, here's a definition and here's some research.
Oh, yeah.
You did something that illuminated it, that humanized it, that connected it to people who might be reading the book.
Yeah. I mean, that's, to me, the beauty of this book is it's a compilation of voices. It's not just our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And for pretty much every topic, one person would be adamantly for something and another person would be adamantly against something, and just showing both sides. Like,
Yeah.
different people have different opinions, different perspectives, and we can learn from each other.
And you didn't kind of hint to the reader that they should feel a certain way, right? You didn't guide us about having an opinion. You let us see these differing opinions and let us as an audience make our own determinations, which is a nice gift, because I'm imagining that a large majority of people who might be interested in this book don't understand this community, right? And that they're coming from a curious space of like, what does this mean? What does this look like? How does one participate in it? What activities are involved? What kind of training is involved? So your book doesn't have a bent where it's like, well, here's how you do things the appropriate way, and makes an assumption that you're already part of this world, but it's a nice space to create curiosity and discussion.
Yeah, we really wanted to make it accessible for people who are curious or maybe new to kink, and for people who are more experienced to get something out of the book as well.
So you've been on a book tour and you've been going around and doing autographs and meeting the people. What kind of reactions are you getting about the book?
I mean, of course, the people who come to talk and see us are supporters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's been an amazing way of connecting with the community and connecting with people who are just, like you said, just sort of curious. I was at the Leather Realm in San Diego Pride, and somebody had said this was their first time walking into a sort of kink space, which is really just a lot of demonstrations and education and things like that. And they bought the book and they were like, I'm so excited, because it's first for a lot of people, when they say this is my first step into, there's a lot of background that goes on to get them there.
That isn't
Right.
a rash decision on a Tuesday morning.
Yeah, no, I don't know many people. I won't say nobody, but I don't know many people who just wake up and say, today I want to be kinky. It's, I've had these thoughts, or I've had these desires or fantasies for as long as I can remember, or maybe just, I saw something in a movie last summer and it inspired me, whatever. But usually it takes a certain amount of self-awareness, maybe even overcoming some shame or biases, to get them to the point of, I'm just going to attend that first munch, which is like a meet and greet, or I'm going to attend my first play party and see where that goes. Right. So the fact that somebody just shows up and says, this was my very first event, it's just usually filled with a lot of excitement and a lot of like, okay, I've taken that first step.
I imagine that many who find themselves in that place where they're ready to take the first step have some trepidation about how to conduct themselves, right? And one of the things that I took away from your book is that there's this idea of getting instruction or getting tutelage, and like, how does someone know that that is a place for them, or how do they find this tutelage?
Yeah, within the kink community, it's pretty common that there is a mentor-mentee sort of structure that if people are searching, they can find. However, that being said, there also are people who seek out newbies for their own sort of exploitive purposes. So the best I can say is to find groups that are sort of vetted, where they're specializing in helping people navigate those early experiences.
Would that be something that someone could seek out a sex therapist to help them like talk about, hey, this is something I'm interested in. I don't know how to approach it. I don't want to be exploited. I don't want to come in and be a newbie and have everybody go like, there's the newbie. Like, is that something that affects?
Oh yeah, absolutely. However, I want to caveat that with sex therapists sometimes have their own specializations. So if you find a sex therapist who specializes in kink, yes. If you find a sex therapist who specializes in, like I said earlier, I have a colleague who does like 100% out of control sexual behavior, groups for men or something. That's maybe not the best, although that particular person, now that I'm thinking, might be okay, but somebody might be a sex therapist and not have any real extra training or knowledge in kink.
Okay.
So yes and no. To be kink knowledgeable, kink aware, that's its own specialized training. Right. So again, it goes back to level of, when it comes to either sex therapy, couples therapy, kink, knowledgeable or poly knowledgeable or non-monogamy knowledgeable, I see it as there's like specific levels of, in the very least, someone who has a comfort and willingness to understand these issues, an interest and an openness in those issues. But in addition to that, like even somebody who says, I'm kink identified, well, that's great. That's a great starting point. There's still education, there's still training, there's still supervision and consultation.
So how would a client who's trying to vet whether or not somebody is a good therapist for them, what are a couple of questions that you would recommend that they ask them?
If somebody has an interest in kink, BDSM, fetish, even if that's not the reason they're coming into therapy, I recommend that clients ask their therapist, what additional education and training do you have in the world of kink or in the kink community? Right? Because it's not that it needs to be the focal point of therapy, but it shouldn't have to be something that's hidden, because hiding leads to shame.
Yes.
And someone might be a great couples therapist, but without any information or knowledge on kink. And I have heard this where somebody goes to a couples therapist and one partner is seeking information or connection in the kink community, and the therapist assumed that that meant that this partner was turning away from the marriage.
Okay.
Or it was a red flag that intimacy was being sought out somewhere else, even though it was completely part of their relationship agreement.
So it could easily, if you don't find someone that's informed and supportive, then it could easily make one of the partners feel alienated, or like there's something that they're doing wrong.
Yeah. Or worse, they get diagnosed with some kind of sexual disorder. Right. And or I have heard of therapists where they've I was in a training where it was all therapists in a circle talking about working with kink clients, and one says, I just don't understand the whole master slave relationship dynamic, and I just tell my couples, you need to leave that at the door so we can talk to each other like egalitarian.
Oh, ouch.
And it's like, okay, but this is like, that's like telling somebody, just forget that you're married and let's just meet as though you just met on the street yesterday. Like, this is an integral part of their how they relate to each other.
Which just kind of goes back to that first topic we were talking about, that we can no longer, unfortunately, just be generalists. There's too much, life is complicated. The things that we want to do are nuanced and little 7-layer dips of things that all interconnect with each other. And so finding the right person is not, it is important to have a connection with them, but also finding that they have the training so that if this is something brand new to you and you're scared about it, or you're nervous that you're not going to navigate it well, that finding the right person can definitely be the piece that helps it be a good transition.
Exactly. And I would like to add to that, it's not the client's responsibility to educate the therapist.
Yes, and I will speak to how many clients are insulted fairly, that if you don't understand something that they're bringing up and they have to educate you, it's kind of like, well, we should be paying them then.
Right? This is called consultation.
Oh, look at me. I just got a grad school level in introduction from a client. Thank you. So
I mean, that's not to say we know everything about
no,
everything, but if it's like this giant piece of your life,
yeah,
you need to find someone who can understand nuances. For example, when you're stuck in your cycle as a couple, your negative relational cycle, how does that affect the way you view your master?
yeah.
Right? How does the cycle affect your DS relationship? The DS part of your relationship, right?
And if there's therapists listening who don't know what that is, then you shouldn't be working with that population.
Right. You should refer to people, or I mean, at least get consultation, learn,
Yeah,
but not from your client.
right. Yeah.
Plus one client is only one perspective, right?
And I think that I think in fairness, we really do want to do the best that we can by our clients. But I think that unfortunately, if something is a new topic for some therapists, or if it's something that they're not totally familiar with, in their, zest to learn from our clients, it can somehow come across as maybe there's some judgment happening, or it's just this odd thing that they've never heard of before, and inadvertently that can create some kind of guilt and shame. And so really, we need to do our work to understand what's happening for couples so that we don't inadvertently give them the impression that it's odd or something that's unusual that we haven't seen before.
Right. That's part of why, in the process of becoming a certified sex therapist, one of the requirements is called a SAR, SAR, that's sexual attitude reassessment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 14 hours of basically getting desensitized to imagery and conversations about sex. Because if you're having that like sort of disgust response, because like, oh my God, I never even thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Your client's going to see that. Your
Sure.
client's going to sense that. And, I'm currently in a supervisor in training program. So my supervisor, his motto is, and I firmly believe this and stand by it, is shame no one.
I love that.
And so it's our job as the therapist to understand our biases, and we all have them, understand our judgments and learn how to suspend judgment, right? That's our work to do. That's not our client's work to do for us.
I love that. I love, Jennifer, that you create such a safe space for our clients and that you really can support them talking about things in a different way and getting guidance and wisdom and love and encouragement to be who they are. So I'm really grateful that you do the work. One last thing before I let you go, because I know you have many things to do. What
Sure.
is your definition of commitment?
My definition of commitment, that's not something I've ever like really thought of in a defining way. I think that when I'm working with my clients, I would ask them, what do you see as a commitment? Because you could be, my first thought was like commitment for longevity, but I also, being part of a non-monogamy community, commitment can be for these moments, for today. Successful relating does not necessarily mean in infinity. It means I'm going to be my authentic self in this moment with you.
Yeah, and it was a trick question or not. It's just my new thing that I'm kind of like asking guests as they come on, because I find one of the things that I'm finding is helpful is when I have clients that are coming in and they want to like change the status or have new conversations or introduce new things. I don't think they're having these conversations. Like, what do you identify as commitment? Because you're using that as the filter as how you're approaching these conversations with your partner. And it's so easy to like make assumptions about these big, broad terms. And if we can talk about what they mean to us individually, we call it like the dream within conflict in the Gottman world, we can have more of an understanding about how to move forward. So you didn't get it wrong. I was just
I know, I love that. I love that because it's making the implicit explicit, which is a lot of the work that we do, right? Like even when people say, what is monogamy?
Yeah.
One person's idea is not the same as another person's idea. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, we get stuck in that, but this is not our commit. Well, what is that? Right. So you did it perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So if anybody listening here wants to find out more about your book or your practice, where will they go? How will they find you?
So the book has its own webpage. It's womenandkinkthebook.com. Again, that's womenandkinkthebook.com. And on that website, you can find ways to contact me or my co-author on there. We also talk about upcoming events, and then we have a whole section on where we've been promoting the book. And then we have a tab called the Sisterhood of Women and Kink, and that is a page really just dedicated to showing community and solidarity and support of one another, and showing that we're not alone. You might feel like you're alone in exploring this aspect of yourself, and you're really not alone. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who are embracing the book and the concepts behind the book.
Wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you have a space for there to be somebody to help guide them through, who's going to do it with love and compassion. And so I loved this conversation. I could keep you on forever.
One more thing.
Yeah.
You said which I have another website. So
that's your book.
That's the book. Yes. So before we hang up, sorry about that. So yeah, to find out more about Affirming Therapy Center, it's affirmingtherapycenter.com. I am currently not taking on new clients. However, I have a wonderful team of all sex positive therapists, and I'm in the process of growing the practice. And just my vision is to create that space for therapists to have these specializations, because I realize if my passion is to help these communities, it's better served with more therapists than just me. So definitely check out affirmingtherapycenter.com, and you can read a little bit more about me. I have my bio up on the website under Meet the Team. And if anybody just has questions or wants to contact me, you can contact me either Jennifer at affirmingtherapycenter.com or Jennifer at womenandkinkthebook.com.
Perfect. And both of your sites have a lot of information and are a great place to get started if you have some curiosity or questions about how to proceed. So Thank you for all that you do, Jennifer. And I'm always grateful for the time I get to spend with you. And I'm definitely going to try to have you back on the podcast if I can get you with your busy schedule. But there's so many more things to talk about. There's so many things that you have a wealth of knowledge about that I'd love it if we could find some time to chat again.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
This has been the D-Spot Podcast with Dr. Dana McNeil. To learn more about Dr. Dana's practice, simply visit us at www.danamcneil.com.